Hi everyone, Sean here from Lines in Sand, and welcome to this episode of the Great Pyramid's so-called Mankiller Tunnel. Recently I did a 28-minute video on the Great Pyramid about who could have gotten inside and how they may have accessed the interior. The episode covered an analysis on the official story that Caliph al-Mamun dug the robbers' tunnel into the pyramid, as well as covering off some other oddities on the external surface of the pyramid, such as the notch in the northeast corner, as well as the so-called Mankiller Tunnel, an excavation made alongside the King's Chamber northern air shaft. I put together quite a bit of info on this so-called Mankiller Tunnel. So with the main video already reaching a much longer length than I anticipated, I decided to break off this section on the Mankiller Tunnel, and that's what you're watching right now. So welcome. Let's take a look at this unusual tunnel and some of the theories that surround it. Get yourself a hot drink, take 5 minutes for yourself, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. So, onto the Mankiller Tunnel. But first, a little background info. Inside both the King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber of the Great Pyramid are two shaft systems. These are frequently called air shafts, but nobody actually really knows what their true function was. They are cut into the stone and enter both the chambers in the north and south walls. There's much speculation about the purpose of these shafts, and this is absolutely something I'll return to in the future, but for now, let's just rehash some vital cliff notes. The shafts in the Queen's Chamber do not penetrate to the outside of the pyramid. The Queen's Chamber shafts have quite famously been explored by custom-built robots on more than one occasion now, and this is something else that I will touch on in the future. The shafts in the King's Chamber, however, do reach the outside of the pyramid. Whether or not these shafts also penetrated the original pyramid casing, I'm not too sure, but where the north air shaft exits the pyramid, a crude tunnel has been dug around the side of it. This tunnel penetrates some ways into the pyramid before stopping. Now, it is quite difficult to find information on this tunnel. Searching online for it doesn't really turn up a wealth of information. I have a few points to go through though, but I would just like to say here that I'd like to hear more about what other people think of this Mankiller Tunnel, because it's not a tunnel that is spoken about all that often. Now, it could be argued, right, this is just a completely pie-in-the-sky kind of theory. It could be argued that whilst scaling the side of a pyramid, you know, if you're an explorer or a robber or anybody in antiquity, whilst scaling the side of the pyramid, the King's Chamber Northern Air, or Star Shaft, that's what other people call them, was discovered by an explorer or a robber, or someone who's just seen this shaft protruding and has gone, wow, what is that? An attempt to widen it or dig around it to gain access to the pyramid could have been undertaken. Even if the main entrance to the pyramid was accessible, it is probable that prior to al-Mamun's excavations, as confirmed by Strabo's accounts among other accounts from antiquity, only the descending passage and subterranean chamber were known about at that time. Therefore, a shaft discovered in the side of the pyramid at this elevation would have been possibly an exciting discovery. However, if this was indeed the case, after tunnelling in for some distance and finding that what we now know as the King's Chamber Northern Air Shaft wasn't going to get any wider at any point, the attempt to access the pyramid in this way may have then been abandoned by these imaginary robbers or explorers. A contrary opinion to this, and one that I personally agreed with until recently, was detailed by the excellent YouTube channel Ancient Architects in his feature-length piece on the mystery of the Great Pyramid. This video is the one single source I've found that has gone into great detail about the supposed purpose of the Mankiller shaft. He raises a very good case, and it was a strong argument as to what the Mankiller tunnel was used for. It was the one thing that I was leaning towards believing personally until I uncovered even more evidence, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Ancient architects proposes that during an inspection by the original constructors of the pyramid, maybe, damage to the tunnel or slippage was noticed in the King's Chamber northern shaft construction. I've provided some screenshots here, but I will link the ancient architects video, the full video, in the description. It's a very long video, but there's a timestamp there I'll provide which gives a much more detailed analysis on the problem with the King's Chamber northern air shaft. Let's also reiterate at this point just how small these air shafts are. They are approximately 8 inches wide by 5 or 5.5 inches tall, which is tiny. In order to access and repair the damage inside, then workers would have needed to tunnel in from the outside in order to reach the point of failure and carry out their repairs, and that this was the reason for the so-called Mankiller tunnel, rather than someone trying to gain access to the pyramid for looting or robbing purposes. However, over 200 pages into Keith Hamilton's excellent Layman's Guide to the Great Pyramid, which I will be doing a full video on just on this paper, which is fantastic, the man himself, Keith Hamilton, reaches the subject of these so-called air shafts in diagrams drawn by John Perring, an engineer who worked on the Great Pyramid alongside Howard Weiss from 1837 onwards. It is shown that the so-called Mankiller tunnel was actually a forced excavation made by Giovanni Caviglia, also in the 19th century. Whether this dig was carried out earlier during Caviglia's first visit in 1816 or alongside his work with Weiss and Perring when Caviglia joined them later on, I have not been able to ascertain this detail just yet. I am not clear why Caviglia would carve this tunnel from the outside in at such a strange place, but he did have a habit of carrying out rather destructive exploration within the Great Pyramid, so I would not put it past him. Caviglia, amongst other places, also dug a forced tunnel alongside the bottom end of the King's Chamber northern shaft, so he had a good go at this poor shaft, assumingly after some sort of secret chamber or answers to where the shafts might have led. Caviglia and Weiss quickly fell out, and it was not long after the latter brought Caviglia back to the Great Pyramid that the two went their separate ways, with Weiss effectively ending Caviglia's work with him in Egypt. It is said that Caviglia didn't do well following orders and working under Weiss as part of his team, and would often be off doing his own thing, exploring the pyramid on his own terms, and therefore messing with the scheduled work of the expedition and so on and so forth. I'm not sure if the digging around the bottom of the King's Chamber northern shaft was also and also digging of the so-called Mankiller tunnel were pieces of work that were sanctioned by Weiss, or whether it was done by Caviglia gone rogue with a few workers in tow, but I have yet to read the full accounts of their expedition. If anyone knows, please feel free to reach out and correct me on this. It is definitely worth mentioning that the excavation that Caviglia made along the lowest point of the King's Chamber northern shaft is now used to house an air conditioning system. This is all locked away behind metal doors and stuff now, but at least a practical use came from Caviglia's destructive digging. Interestingly, this air conditioning system, which I think is it's actually a ventilation system rather than a air conditioning, actually, it was installed by Rudolf Gantenbrink, the man who built the first robot to explore the Queen's Chamber air shafts. This is an interesting cross-section of skills in regards to Mr. Gantenbrink, to be honest. I have someone coming soon to install a positive input ventilation system at my house, and I wonder if he will also be able to build me a robot capable of exploring ancient ruins. Somehow I doubt it. So what do you think? Do you think that this mysterious Mankiller tunnel was dug by Caviglia? Or do you believe that it was used by the original pyramid craftsmen to repair the King's Chamber northern shaft? Or do you think there was another purpose for carving this excavation? Also, just generally, if you are watching this video and have further information on the Mankiller tunnel, then please reach out, drop a comment, or let me know your opinion on its function. That has been all for today, but let's have an open and civil dialogue about this. As always, like I said, let me know what you think, and if I've missed something, indeed, please do let me know also in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next video. Take care out there.